Hey, Carl. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Sandra.
I am so excited about our interview today for Christian Radio for the Nation's Capital, brand new website launched after the radio station sold, and on which you had a radio program, Faith at Work. Awesome, interviewing CEOs from across the country. And that was probably the springboard after you had launched the High Tech Pro Breakfast. So you've got an incredible entrepreneurial streak in you, and you have launched so many ministries and companies. And this is now as an author of a new book called How to Live the Abundant Life. And I am really excited because I love the book. It's got wonderful personal stories. And so give us a background on your professional background and then how all that has actually been the principles you've learned along the way to live an abundant life.
Yeah, so I'm kind of an entrepreneur, Sandra. I started out as an entrepreneur right out of grad school, and not all entrepreneurial ventures succeed. So, my wife and I have 5 children, and she asked me after 2 venture-backed startups blew up in the early 2000s to please not do any more startups while she's raising all those kids. And so I obliged, and I took a big company job for 20 years. But that didn't stop me from being kind of a faith-based entrepreneur in the meantime. And so I didn't come to faith in Christ until I was 24 years old. I was an atheist growing up. I wasn't exposed to anything faith-based. And so I really didn't have anywhere, any means by which to believe. And so when I became a believer during my second year of graduate school, it really struck an eagerness in me to get the gospel message out to others. Like, how could you grow up in the United States of America and not receive the gospel for 24 years? And so none of these were really done in the flesh. They were all callings, where
Mm,
the Lord puts something on your heart and then just tugs at your heart, like, you're called to do this. And so the first one of those that I did was a ministry called Christ on the Mall. I didn't start that. I heard about it at church. And so I stepped forward. I had never shared my faith with anyone. And
mm.
now it was my time to do this. And I did it on July 4th in Washington, D.C., on the mall, where you got thousands and thousands of people there to see the fireworks and
That's
whatever
huge.
entertainment they have. And I had people walking up with boa constrictors hanging off their necks and stuff. It was a wild sight. And I had to like rely on the training I had received to be able to minister to those people as they approached us. And so I did that. It was very uncomfortable, but the guy who organized that, he also invited me to be part of a ministry in the juvenile detention center. And so I did 20 years of ministry work in the juvenile detention centers. And the way this works, Sandra, was I was invited to go in, and I honestly didn't have an excuse why I couldn't go. So that was
Mm.
my answer. I can't think of an excuse why I can't go. I didn't want to go to a jail. I had no desire. I had avoided a jail when I was a kid and didn't want to go as an adult. But I went, and what happened was, in the Fairfax County Juvenile Detention Center, they split the church services up into 2 services, a couple times after going in. And the guy who invited me, Chris Cole was his name, he moved to California, and I was left with this other guy, Pip Patterson. And before you knew it, Pip was leading one church service and I was leading the other church
Wow.
services. So part of it was that the facility was expanding, and the other part of it was they didn't want rival gang members in the same
Mm.
church service. So to that, it doesn't mean that we never had a gang fight. I actually had one break out in the middle of a church service.
Oh, wow.
Uh, but I guess I had only one, which is fortunate. I suppose we could have had more if we didn't split it up. But I learned how to give the gospel in front of the toughest audience that you could ever imagine: juvenile delinquents.
Yep.
And if you know that crowd at all, they are unforgiving. And if you don't 100% believe what you're saying, or if there's a hole they can poke in what you're saying, they'll do it. And
Hmm.
and so I found myself going in there, and it didn't take me long to figure out that if I got the biggest, meanest guy in the group, the alpha of the group on my side, all the other guys would fall into
Mm,
place. So I would go in, there might be 20, mainly boys in there, 17 and under, rough crowd. And I would look at the biggest guy and I could tell who he was. I'm like, are we cool? And if he said we're cool, then everybody else was cool too. So
wow.
that's how I kept order. And it worked. And then look, when I first started doing it, I wasn't really good at it. I would read a written message because I didn't know what I was doing. But by the end of my 20 years in there, I'd walk in with no paper and I would just talk. And those guys, if they would try some of their old shenanigans, I'd be like, look, guys, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. So I 20 years, because they were only 17 at the oldest. And that was really rewarding. But I didn't stick with just that. I got called into a workplace ministry, and that was the High Tech Prayer Breakfast that you're very familiar with. Started that in 2002 under the umbrella of High Tech Ministries in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hmm.
They incubated us for a year and then spun us out. And then we had our own organization that I still am chairman of the organization 22 years later. I'm not running it. I'm not, running the planning committee like I used to. I've handed that off because I've been called to do other things. I mean, I was called to plant a church in Lovettsville, Virginia when I moved there. And then I've since moved to Texas, where I have started the South by Southwest Sunday service. And that was, held last year at South by Southwest. And it ended up being the largest South by Southwest official interactive event at South by Southwest, which was amazing,
Yeah,
right? So
that is amazing.
we served 4,000 meals at the
Wow,
event. So I have to assume there were
incredible.
somewhere near 4,000 people there, unless people were eating multiple meals. And it was a fun Christian event. People came for, I mean, it had the programming of a normal South by Southwest event. It had
Some
panel
people might not be
discussions.
familiar with what South by Southwest is. So this was the faith-based venture of that, correct?
Well, they have five components. They have music, they have film, they have education, interactive, and there's one I'm missing, but maybe it's four. So and to present each of those industries, they have keynote speakers, they have panel discussions, and they have music and socializing. And so we had some of each of those where we
Okay.
had amazing panel discussions. We had the CEO of Intel speak. We had Lecrae perform and others. We had other speakers and other performers, but those were kind of the headliners. And so people came to get free barbecue, to hear a great keynote, or to hear a venture capital panel, or the music. And as I watched, I think we could fit 1,500 people at a time in there. And so I watched people coming and dancing to the music, and they would get the gospel message in
That's
between the
awesome.
songs. It was amazing, and we had many responses of people coming to faith. I
Mm,
think post COVID, people were looking for something more meaningful, and so we just right place, right time. We struck a chord. We're doing it again
fine
this year.
timing. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. That was an incredible event to launch just as you were moving to Texas. But I tell you, that's when they do things down there in Texas, they're big. So you fit right in.
Yeah, yeah, we did it big for sure.
And you've launched multiple companies. You've written a book now, How to Live the Abundant Life. And I really want our listeners to get a hold of this book. What's the place? What's the website for them to get a
Well,
copy? They can get a paperback or an online version, right?
yeah, it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble right now. The audio book is close to coming out. So
Oh,
I
great.
presume you'll be able to find that through Amazon or Audible. I don't know yet. I'm not doing all of that, but it'll be available. And then it's also being distributed to bookstores too. So I just finished that process. So I'm hopeful that it'll reach local bookstores. If you have one in your neighborhood. But right now, Amazon is where I got my copies of it. And certainly if you're a Barnes and Noble person, you can get them there. Just look up How to Live the Abundant Life. And if you put in my name, Carl Grant III, it'll pop up. So Sandra, what I did with this book was I, I'm not the 24-year-old young person anymore. That was kind of a halfway point for me. I've now lived a lot of life, and I know what it's like to be a person not of faith and a person of faith. I know what it's like to be a person overweight and now fit. I know what it's like to be somebody who's troubled by, thoughts, negative thoughts, and now somebody who doesn't have negative thoughts. I have positive thoughts. And so I take the readers through how I learned to, live abundantly in all those areas of my life. So it covers areas such as finding your purpose in life, uh, maintaining a sound mind, growing spiritually, maintaining a healthy body, um, developing and maintaining relationships, establishing boundaries for those relationships, uh, finding abundance in the community and marketplace, such as being likable, developing a character and building a legacy and becoming part of a community. So those are all important aspects of life. And I talk about how I made mistakes in each of those areas. As you know from reading my book, I'm far from perfect today, but I was far more imperfect before, and I learned through trial and error, reading and talking to others and experiencing life, what works and what doesn't work. And so I
Well, it
try to
makes you
put some of
relatable.
those.
People can relate to a non-perfect person. So sharing those personal stories was powerful.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, how many of us just are bombarded with negative thoughts about how we look, how we come across, people tend to think negatively. And so your thoughts control your words, and your words really set the tone for your life. So if you're constantly speaking negativity over yourself, I don't even like to say the negative words, but people say all sorts of negative things. They look in the mirror and they, oh, I don't look good. Oh, I'm getting old. Oh, I'm gaining weight. And what happens is you start saying those things. I don't even like saying them as an illustration. What happens is you talk yourself into being unhealthy, overweight, and old. And I watch my friends who think and speak that way, and you can see it. You can see they look 10, 15 years older than me, and they're my same age. Whereas I look the reverse, because I say I'm getting better every year, and I honestly believe that. And so
And you are,
I have,
you're launching new ministries, new companies. I mean, I'm just astounded by what you can accomplish just in 1 year.
well, part of what I lay out in the book is how to set goals
Hmm.
and how to work towards those goals. And so, sometimes you might want to do something that seems absolutely impossible. And a couple of the illustrations I give in the book are, I grew up wanting to fly airplanes. I didn't know anybody who was a pilot. There were no pilots in my family, but I wanted to do that. And it took me 20 some odd years to do it, but I did it, and I got my pilot's license.
All
But
right.
you got to take, achievable steps. You got to have a plan to getting there. Even writing a book. I mean, if you think about writing a book, that is like an impossible thing to do. I can't tell you how many times I sat down and started to write, and like, I cannot write a whole book. I don't, but if you break it into achievable portions,
Hmm.
such as writing an essay. Anybody can write an essay. We all have to write essays to get into college or whatever we did in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you can write an essay. And I wrote a series of essays that sat on my computer for a long time because it didn't quite make up a book. And so what I decided I wanted to do was I wanted to interview people so I had material for a book. And so rather than interviewing people for a book that may or may not happen, if you start a podcast and you interview them for a podcast, you
Mm-hmm.
then have a reason to interview those people, and then you capture those transcripts. And so I've had two podcasts, The Faith at Work, that you're familiar with, and then I had another one called Rainmakers, and that was really talking to others who did what I did in the business world and finding out how they did it. And I started to realize as I did that podcast that, because the original idea for the book was a business book,
Mm-hmm.
but I realized that the things that work in business, the things you do to make other people like you and want to do good for you
Mm-hmm.
in business, also work at home and in the community. And so I scrapped the business book idea, and I did a self-help book. And most of what's in the book is personal stuff, right? That will help you in business too, if you're in business. But I didn't want to, if there's a retired person or a student or somebody who's
Mm-hmm.
not in the business world yet or is done with the business world, I wanted to appeal to them as well. And so I wrote it to appeal across all demographic lines.
And you have a template as well, so people can use it like a Bible study or even a business meeting, a weekly. It's just got a wonderful template involved in the book at the end, correct? Or at the end of each chapter.
Yeah, at the end of each chapter, there's a little kind of a workbook type thing where you can go through and I've taken the summary of each chapter and I put it into practical steps about how you can apply these things in your life. And when you write something like that, you don't know, are people actually going to do this? But they have. I mean, I've had reviews on Amazon that have said that the favorite part of the book are the summaries at the end of each chapter. And people are actually going and doing that and using it as a workbook to improve their lives, which I mean, it just tickles me, that
Mm.
people are actually taking it and doing it and getting results from it. And so far I've gotten, last I looked, I had 26 5-star reviews on Amazon.
All
I don't know what
right.
I have on Barnes and Noble because I haven't checked, but that's pretty encouraging,
It is.
and I don't know who all those people are. I mean, I get on a Zoom call with a prospective client for, a company I'm doing consulting work with, and they say, I've read your book, and and they're relating to me through, what they've read in the book. That's
Right.
pretty cool, and so it's out there. It hit #1 in certain categories on Amazon, which was pretty neat to
It
see, right?
is.
Yeah, and as I do these podcasts, I think more and more people I don't know are starting to read it, so that's kind of neat to see.
It
So if
is.
if you do happen to get the book and read it, and if you like well, so far it's only been people who have liked what they've read, go ahead and review it,
Uh-huh.
and go ahead and we read all those reviews. And if you want to connect with me on social media, if you mention this interview or if you mention the book, just I get a lot of strange unsolicited messages on LinkedIn. So just mention that you're not a stranger, that you've actually heard me or read me, and I'd be happy to hear from you. So if you look up Carl Grant the Third
Okay.
on LinkedIn, or if
LinkedIn.
you find me on Instagram, it's Carl with a C dot Grant dot I for the third.
Okay.
Be happy to interact with you there.
Awesome. Well, it's just been incredible to see all the different ventures that God has definitely blessed you, and you have learned to live the abundant life, and He's brought multiple opportunities to you as a corporate executive, as an entrepreneur, and also as a faith-based leader in the marketplace, which so many people are not comfortable going to church. So you've launched a number of workplace ministries which are reaching people in corporate America. So uh, that's incredible because churches are not growing, but these ministries are. South by
Well,
Southwest.
it made my work life a lot more meaningful. So when I started with the High Tech Prayer Breakfast, um, I had just started at a new firm, what turned out to be a global law firm in the tech industry. And when I joined that firm, I remember saying to God as I'm walking over there, why are you sending me to a law firm? Like I'm not a lawyer. I never set out to do this. And I just didn't quite understand why I was going to do this. And so when I got there, I realized that the firm I was going to had tentacles into the entire technology ecosystem. And so
Mm,
there was no better place to be than that firm for reaching all of those people. And so we reached over 800 people each year.
wow.
And
Yeah.
then even more when the recordings and videos went out. And I found myself having business meetings with people that I thought were business meetings, but turned out to be ministry meetings. Like people wanted to talk about stuff they were dealing with in their lives.
Mm,
And that was pretty rewarding because not only were you getting business done, you're actually having a meaningful impact in people's lives, because whether you're a believer or not, we all have problems. We all have, none of us have perfect families. Everybody has issues in their family. But if you don't have a faith basis to lean on when you face those things, your world can crumble.
Yeah.
People go through divorces, people go through, their my car breaks down just like the next guy's car. People get sick in my family. I write about that in my book. I dealt with a major health crisis in my family. My wife was bedridden with Lyme disease for 3 years, and then we went to find out that all of my children also had Lyme disease.
Oh.
And through our research into this disease, we learned stuff that's not even available in the scientific community. For example, we learned that Lyme disease is actually transmissible human to human. We had no idea. You won't find that anywhere.
I've never heard that either.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't know it either
I thought you only
we,
got it from deer that were out in the country.
well, I thought the
Because
same
your wife
thing.
rides horses, right? So I figured that was where she caught it.
Maybe it was, we don't know for sure. I mean, she did have
Yeah.
a tick bite, but my children didn't all have those tick bites. So they could have been born with it, right? They could have been born with the Lyme disease, or if you are married and you kiss your spouse or kiss your boyfriend or girlfriend, those spirochetes that comprise Lyme disease, they live in your saliva. And so they can be transmitted person to person. And you can be a carrier of Lyme disease without having any symptoms. And so that's what we found, was that people would test positive, of having Lyme disease, but they have no symptoms. And so what would typically trigger those symptoms would be some sort of trauma in somebody's life. A car crash, a loss of a job, a divorce, a death in the family, something, and so for some reason the immune system would respond and start, I don't know, you start manifesting the Lyme disease. And so, after so I found something through my work at the firm I work for that killed my wife's Lyme disease. And it's something that's not available, out there through the medical community, but we tried everything. And this was actually a natural treatment. And we were actually able to go and patent the treatment that
Wow,
that got
that's
her better,
incredible.
which was amazing. Yeah. And so we're working on, so we can't make any health claims today. I don't make any health claims. All I can tell you is my wife got better, and it's anecdotal information. But people that use the treatment tend to feel better. Their symptoms tend to dissipate. And so, we'll have to do scientific testing to make sure that we actually do what we think we're doing, and we'll have some clinical data eventually to prove that, but we don't have it today. It's all anecdotal, but it's much anecdotal when it comes to Lyme disease. But what we found is that the thing that treated her Lyme disease also treats other previously thought incurable diseases.
That's
we're
remarkable.
Yeah, we just finished our first set of clinical trials to show that we actually do have an impact on one of those previously thought incurable diseases, and we're going to get more data. This is clinical data done by a third party that's not an anecdotal thing. So that's pretty exciting. So we're turning what does the Bible say? All things work together for good for those who love the Lord, right? And are called according to his purpose. Well, it was a tough trial with the Lyme disease, but now that we have discovered that we can kill other diseases, I think, we're going to make the world a better place eventually.
Yes. Well, there are a lot of people that are going to appreciate that. How would they get in touch with you if they're interested in learning more after this interview?
Well, I gave my social media coordinates there.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Instagram.
Okay.
Those two places are good places to find me. I sent you the link to
right.
the supplement. I call it, it's just a supplement today.
Okay.
And it, we refer to it as something that enhances the immune system. That's about all we can say at this point. But when your immune system is enhanced, it tends to fight diseases. And it certainly has my wife out of bed, and she's off riding her horse now. So she couldn't ride any horses when she was sick. She couldn't really get out of bed. It was pretty rough.
Wow. Well, that's a remarkable story. And that's one that you've shared in your book. And yeah, that put a lot of stress, I'm sure, on you and your kids. And so that's what I love about reading the book. It's you share personal stories and then the principles that you learned along the way. And it makes it so practical. And I hope many of our listeners that are tuning into this um, podcast are going to order the book. You can get it in paperback or you can get it on Kindle. And I also want to make sure that everyone knows the date again for your next South by Southwest event, which is
It's March 10th. Yeah,
March
so
10th.
Sunday, March 10th, we're going to be at Stubbs in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
It's a pretty well-known place in Austin. If you've been to Austin, Texas, most musicians have performed there at some point or other.
Okay.
And so it's a popular thing. We're really thrilled that we have favor with them, and they love having us. They said we're their favorite event to host there, which is pretty cool.
It
I've seen
is.
that they host some pretty cool things there. And yeah, we're going to have Saturday night, we're going to have some music there as well as a movie premiere, because
Oh,
Angel Studios is a sponsor of our event this year.
that
So
is huge.
we're really excited about that. I'm a huge Angel Studios
So,
fan.
yes,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
promote it on
So
the website as well when they have a movie coming out. Also,
yeah, well,
Angel
they're going to be
Studios.
premiering a movie. I can't remember which one, but there is going to be one premiering Saturday night at our event. So
Oh, I'm
it's
gonna
pretty
have to make
exciting.
that event for sure. Absolutely. Well, I also wanted to mention, and I don't know if we have time to do it. What time is it? We have another interest that I've talked to numerous people, and they are fascinated with your venture capital expertise and connections. And many people who own businesses would love to know a little bit more about your expertise and background with the venture capital industry.
Yeah, so being in professional services for a good portion of my life, I at PricewaterhouseCoopers and then at that law firm that I worked for, it was one of the premier law firms, Cooley. And the way we went about doing business development there wasn't going out and trying to sell companies on using our services. We tried to help them with the things that they needed. And most emerging companies need introductions to potential customers and partners as well as investment. And so I made it my business, and my team that I managed made it their business to get to know the venture capital community very well.
Mm,
And then we would make those warm referrals to those funds to get
okay.
companies funded. And those funded companies would become big clients of the firm. And so when I left the firm, we launched a company called Capital Raise. It's capitalraise.net. And what we did was we built a kind of a smart LinkedIn type platform. If you go out and you try to figure out who's a good fit for your company, there's a number of data sources out there, PitchBook, Crunchbase. There's even a company called Grata that you can look these sources up, but it's not going to give you a warm introduction to any of them. If you reach
Mhm.
out cold, good luck getting them to respond. It's hard to get a cold outreach responded to. And so it,
Especially in
by
the
by
corporate world.
well, venture capital world, they see thousands and thousands of deals. And so
Yeah.
they're looking for a reason to say no. And so what we do is we have a matching algorithm on our platform that will help us identify which of the thousands of investors we know are the best fit for that company. And
Okay.
then we also have a grading system that we can see that allows us to see the strength of that relationship. And then we have an kind of pretty good indication as to what the likelihood of getting a response is. And so what we'll do is we'll get a company, and I'll give one example. We had a company that we made 200 referrals for this company. That got them 40 meetings with
Wow.
investors. And out of that 40 meetings, 5 of those turned into term sheet level discussions. All
Mm.
right. We're still trying to get that one closed. But that's kind of that funnel, and
Mhm.
that's a good company. That not every company is going to get those results. Some companies, if we don't do our work at the front end in terms of screening out the good ones from the bad ones,
Yeah.
they're not going to get as good of results, but some might even get better. It just depends on the entrepreneur. Has the entrepreneur done it before? Right. Usually entrepreneurs that have delivered returns to investors in the past, that they will take a chance on those entrepreneurs of being able to do it again.
Right.
And then do they have a large and growing market? And do they have existing revenue traction? So companies that have $1 million of annually recurring revenue when they start the capital raise process do a lot better than those that don't. And
Okay.
so I really encourage entrepreneurs to try to get your business pretty far along before you go out for institutional funding. And certainly we can help with that.
Well, I think that's awesome. And one of the principles that you had in your book, which I thought was something that I felt that you are gifted at particularly, is you said offer to help someone even without an incentive for profit. In other words, just out of wanting to be a giver instead of a taker. And in the corporate world, that's very hard to come by, but you demonstrate that repeatedly. And I think God has blessed you because that is a deep-seated motivation for many people in the corporate world. So there are principles that are practical and you've implemented them, and God has certainly given you great opportunities to show how to put those principles into action. So I think that's
Sandra, I think
commendable.
the most rewarding thing that you can do is when you're doing it for somebody who can't repay you. Right.
Yes.
So all the 20 years I went into the juvenile detention center,
Uh-huh.
none of those kids had anything to offer me. And you know what? I felt so good when I walked out of there knowing I had impacted somebody's life. And I felt even better when I wrote about it in the book when I ran into, one of these kids at a Chick-fil-A. And I didn't even know he was somebody from the detention center. He's going
Huh.
on and on and on about how all these good things were coming together in his life. I'm like, who is this guy? And I thought maybe he's one of my kids' friends. I just didn't recognize him. And then
Hmm.
after he kept talking, I realized, oh my gosh, you were in the church service at the detention center and you listened to me. And now you're getting a job, you're going to college, you're enrolling in the military. I'm like, this kid was telling me all this stuff. I'm like, wow, how awesome is that? Right. And
Oh,
so I
that's
don't get to
great.
see all of those. I mean, literally, we ministered to hundreds of kids. I don't know, hundreds and hundreds over 20 years. I've lost track, but I'm sure there's stories like that all over the place
So
that we
there's your next book. It's going to be the stories of those people that you touch, because they're going to see these interviews and they're going to reach out and then it goes, I've got a story for you, because it was
maybe,
because
I don't know.
you sharing the gospel and being so upfront about it that transformed their lives. So
Yeah,
I think
well, we'll
it's
see. I'm in Texas now. Most of those people are back in the DC area, so I don't know how many if I'm going to come across, unless they hunt me down on social media.
probably,
But I don't need to see all of them. I'll have my reward in heaven, and
yes.
I figure on the other side of heaven, I'll be able to see what impact we actually had. Because it's hard to see when you're in there. Because not everybody is showing what's going on in their heart as you're
Yeah.
sharing with them.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I had this message I would give for Christmas. We would basically take the song "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" and we'd break that down into a sermon. Like what do those words actually mean?
Uh-huh.
And I heard it done once before, and so I did my version of it, and I just repeated that message every year because if and I would say at the beginning of this message, I say if you're hearing this message for a second time, you should have listened the first time, right? So if you're back in here a year later, shame on you. You get to hear it
Yeah.
again.
That's a great story. I love that. Well, this has been a great interview. Thank you so much for sharing your time. You're a busy entrepreneur, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. So this interview will hopefully be launched on our YouTube channel, and maybe we can even get it launched on LinkedIn, and then all those people that whose lives you've touched in some form or fashion, marketplace ministry, your radio talk show, podcast. Um, you've just got some wonderful opportunities and that God has blessed you with. And so just appreciate you sharing the principles that have taught you along the way. And you you shared your personal stories that people can relate to. It wasn't a perfect life, and you learned through the struggles and trials and temptations, and I just think it's commendable. So thank you. Appreciate you taking the time today to talk to us.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandra. It's been a pleasure.
You have a great weekend, and I'll look forward to seeing you at South by Southwest, and it's March 10th.
March 10th. Yeah, 9th and 10th.
Okay. We'll see you there.
All right, Sandra.
All right. Bye.